or less,
Yeah,
because it's all above tree line, the best skiing. And I couldn't get used to skiing in trails. I said, this is ugly. This sucks.
I still don't. I much prefer skiing in the open.
Yeah, well, that's what I was just doing with my daughter when I wrecked my back.
So you just want to get it into position, then leave it there.
Just keep it there.
Yeah. Now, okay, down. Watch the water and
Oh, that's okay. There's plenty there, more where that came from.
Okay, so. Okay, well, let's go with. I'm recording.
Okay. Yeah. I got to. When I was in Switzerland, I was wondering where to go next, because I couldn't afford to work there. I mean, it just wasn't making any money. I was competing with the Spanish laborers for about $4 a franc an hour, and as much as I liked it, so some friends like Leighton Core was one of them, and an old friend Lee Miller was another one. I mean, really, not an old friend, but a friend from the Vagabond, and another Gary Phillips. They had all been around Aspen, and they thought that's where I should go. There was work, and you could actually make a bit of a living there. So that's what I did. After a couple of years in Switzerland, I went to the World's Fair with most of the Vagabond people that were migrating to Canada, which was quite a few of them. And from there, I took the bus to Aspen, which was quite a disappointment because it was sagebrush and hills, and I'd been in the Alps with just mountains and valleys and lakes everywhere. But I got used to it, and there was work and people, and then once I got my own transport, I could get around, and the mountains got better, and the walking was great. That's what I really liked the most, is walking in the mountains. And here I am 45 years later, still in Colorado. So I think it was the right move, although I left Aspen 35 years ago or so, going for cheaper real estate and more realistic way of life, but work's still over there. That's still the goal of mine for filling the bank account.
You built this house, didn't you?
Oh, no.
Oh, I thought I was under the impression you did.
No. It was built in 1946 by,
It was Davey. He built his house. Or he's still building it.
I think he built onto something, though. There was a cabin there.
Was there?
Yeah, oh yeah. And he did extensive rebuilding of it, whereas this one we just finished out the sunroom, which was a porch.
He's still doing extensive rebuilding of it.
Is he? Yeah. I'm not
There's
that kind
like
of
untaped drywall.
Oh.
It's really funny.
Yeah. I'm not a builder. The only thing I've actually contracted to build was my cabinet shop. And just because I was in a hurry and I had a job coming up that I needed some more space, and the place where I was at was kind of wanted me out because some new owners had bought it. And I had this quite a large job for John Denver coming up, and so I had to get the shop built in a hurry and get things moving. And I'm more of a painter and a fixer-upper than a builder. All my carpentry work was finish work. Guys kept wanting to teach me how to frame, and I'd try to get out there and frame with them for a few days, and the suntan lotion overcame me, and it just was heavy work, even though they gave me the simplest work, like sawman and things. I've just always been a finish carpenter.
So let's do the segue from
Okay.
Well, I'll piece all this together. It doesn't
That's
matter
why I
what
just
order.
started what was in my mind.
Yeah. None of this has to be chronological.
Yeah.
You'll be surprised how this works. I can do a lot to you.
Okay.
Great.
Well, I better watch it.
Let's talk about, you did the kitchen in the Vagabond. We know that, but talk about it, and then talk about how you're still doing kitchens.
Okay.
We touched on it yesterday, but the wind had come up.
Okay, sure. Yeah. Working at the Vagabond as handyman, one of my biggest project, and the one they wanted me to start with, was building a kitchen. When I was in high school, I'd worked in a boatyard, And so at least I knew how to cut a board and how to put a screw in and do a few things like that and use a measuring tape, although boat yards don't use a lot of measuring tapes, but I learned. And so Alan had me rebuild the kitchen. We just stripped it out and painted it, and then started installing shelving and sinks and machinery, kind of industrial cooking machinery, I call it, as big cooking pots and stuff. I had to knock holes in the wall. That's where Leighton Cord really came in, because being a mason, he knew what a thick stone wall took to get a hole in it in a hurry. And so I fixed up the benches and tables in the staff eating little place, which was really nice, and yeah, we got that in real good shape, and I wonder how long it lasted, but that was my first kitchen. And without knowing it, although I kind of tended to be a carpenter in my mind, but not in my skills, when I went to Aspen, I started trying to find a job woodworking, and I didn't know anything about house building, so that didn't go anyplace. And I knew about painting, so I tried painting. But I'd only done boat painting, which is real fine work, and I worked for one painter for a day and sanding motel door trim. I got 6 of them done and got fired because I think I was supposed to do the whole motel in one day and just whip around and spend about 5-10 minutes in each room instead of sanding every crack and corner like I was used to. But nobody told me, so anyway, I got fired from that, or laid off, whatever you want to call it. And then I found another painter who was more interested in keeping me on for a while, and I worked with him, and he actually asked me if I wanted to really apprentice with him, work with him for years. But a friend of mine is living in the same house with, at the Garrett, the same rooming place. He could get me a job as a carpenter with not a real professional crew, but they did good work, and so it didn't matter that I wasn't a real professional carpenter, and that worked, and I stayed with the carpentry after that, and eventually we moved to, well, I built a few kitchens in Aspen in the owners' garages, and I got me started on making kitchens, which, well, the VAG actually got me started, and then based on that, I got into a little more professional cabinet making, and eventually ended up with my own shop over here in Peonia. And we built some pretty fancy kitchens before we quit doing it. They were getting way out there, some of these houses in Aspen, so that was quite thrilling, but I'm glad I don't have that responsibility anymore.
I was told to ask you,
Okay.
That there's a pretty good story about John Denver's kitchen.
Oh yeah. Well, he had his house remodeled.
Wait, just say John Denver had his.
Okay. Yeah, John Denver, he had his house remodeled every few years, or additions really put on as he got kids and whatever. And so a friend of mine, Ivor Eidsmoe, became his contractor this time. And he always involved me whenever he could. And so we built a lot of cabinets for him, and bathroom vanities and bars and things, and made a new kitchen for him with 2.5 thick countertops and made out of butcher block looking maple, and with a big black walnut trim around it and all, and that was all fine and dandy. And a couple years later, he got into an argument with his wife. I can't think of her name this minute. And he got out the chainsaw and actually started cutting the island countertop that I had made. And he made some pretty good dents with the chainsaw, but he obviously wasn't real good at it, or he could have done a lot more damage. And they called me in to fix it, and I gave him a price of about $1,000, but somebody else underbid me, and that was the last time. But while I was there doing that, I had to adjust some doors, so I stayed an extra hour, and the Budweiser man came up, and he says, comes in the kitchen and says, "Where's John?" And I said, "I think he's in there." And so John comes out, and John says, "Yeah, I'll have 2 more kegs of Guinness this week." And I thought, oh, that'll be nice. So the Budweiser man brings in the barrels and installs them somewhere I didn't quite see. And I was working for free that day, just fixing things up that were beyond my guaranteed time, but I didn't care. I was expecting a pint of Guinness, but that didn't happen. So that was the end I saw of John Denver. But he was quite a nice fellow, and he had a party for the whole crew, and he was right there the whole time, and he had a fantastic memory. Claire and I were delivering some bookcases for him for another edition once, and he picked off her name right away, and was just so friendly. And when he had that party, he was just like any old person, and he had a telescope set up, and he wanted everybody to look through his telescope, and he was so nice.
Okay, we're recording.
Being a traveler, and I'd worked all my young life through college, and it came out ahead, so financially. So I thought, what am I going to do? Go to work? I didn't I didn't have to go to Vietnam because I was just medically ineligible, and so I started taking a trip around the world. And my stepfather had some relative that was working in Nepal at the time. That was about 1962 or 3, and so that's about all I knew about Nepal. And then when I was in Japan on this world tour, I met some people in a youth hostel from Berkeley, and they'd just been trekking in Nepal. And I thought, wow, that really sounds like a great idea. I'd never really done overnight camping and things like. I've done overnight camping, but not backpacking at that age, and because of my background on boats. And I thought, that is what I've really got to do. And so eventually, after going through Southeast Asia and part of India, I get to Nepal, and I'm going trekking. Well, it turned out it was the beginning of the monsoon season, so I should have just stayed, because the place was fantastic in those days. It was just a garden, and you couldn't believe the stuff going on there. But anyway, I kept on going because I was kind of anxious to get to Europe, and as I'd never seen that, and so that was all I knew about Nepal. And I said, if I ever get back again, I got to make sure it's the right season. So after being in Europe and at a Vagabond and meeting people that had been there, like Willens and his climb on Gauri Shankar, and Dougal just been on Annapurna and South Face, Directisma. And I had another friend, Lee Miller, who had relatives that had the first hospital in Kathmandu. I got really interested in it. So I went back home and worked on some yachts that I'd planned to do anyway, and put away some money. And then I did a quick trip of a half a year around South America, and got back to Europe and did some walking there in Scotland and Switzerland and Poland. And then when I got back to the Vagabond, the Lee Miller was still there, and we talked a little more, and got me really fixed up for my trip to Nepal. I was on another round-the-world trip, going around the other way this time. And so after my summer in Europe, which was the monsoon season in Nepal, I finally got to my goal. This was my mountain trip around the world that I was doing, by the way. And so I just took an airplane straight from Switzerland to Kathmandu, and on the plane, or just at the airport getting off in New Delhi and changing planes for Kathmandu, I met a guide with Mountain Travel Berkeley, who I think that at that time that business was only a year or two old, and he'd been a client the year before, and he'd been an atomic physicist at Berkeley, at one of those labs there, the Lawrence Livermore Lab or whatever they call it. And he decided trekking was better than atomic science, so we ended up rooming together, and he helped me a whole bunch and gave me some ideas for walking in Nepal, and which I did, and I just loved it. And I spent 7 months there, and one trip was 3 months long, and I did another one to the Everest region that was 2 months long, and then I carried on my trip around the world through Indonesia and New Zealand.
So that was what that was the northwest face.
Yeah, the Durnfirth International Expedition that failed completely. What year was that? 60. It'd be 60. It'd be 70. 1970. Okay, I'll start with that. Okay. This trip, long trip in Nepal, was 1969 to 1970, and I was kind of just by chance. Dougal Haston and was going there too to work on Durnfirth's International Expedition. He and Don Willens were both going, and so we were going to be there at the same time. So I kind of arranged my whole trip so I'd be at base camp about the same time they were. I was kind of hoping to maybe take a peek at the ice fall or just see what I could learn. It didn't really matter, but so Dougal and I we did a few things in Kathmandu, dinners together and stuff, and then I went out to do some other do my trek. I was trekking to Everest, which would take 2 weeks in those days, and he was flying to Lukla and walking in, so he was going to be a bit ahead of me. And when I got to the base camp there, he was there, and we talked and spent evenings together and stuff. But I didn't really. He was busy, and I didn't really get involved in the expedition any way that I was kind of dreaming possibly. But the only other, let's see, I kind of messed that up. But
I'm going to change the tape.